This is the I Read Comic Books podcast, the very best podcast for regular comic book fans. I'm your host, Mike Rappin, live at C2E2 with the one and only Paul Jasley.
Michael, it's good to see you face to face in this hotel room right now.
In this hotel room. It is Sunday night, the day after, the last day of the con. Paul and I have been on our feet nonstop since Friday.
Yeah.
It's been an insane little weekend, man. I'm going to start this off. We don't ever do this on the live show ever. This never happens.
Never happens.
But I'm going to crack open a cold one really quick.
A cold 8-ounce beer.
Yeah, we've been walking around. We met up with our good friend Hugh. Met up with our good pal
Friends
Ricardo, friends
Yep.
of the show. Tonight, hung out, had a beer, had some very, very good food at a nice
Good
little
food.
restaurant /
Yeah.
bar called
Skylark.
The Skylark.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think what we wanted to do tonight is talk a little bit about the con.
Yes. It's very funny to me. I'm sure most listeners that listen to the show regularly may have been to a con before, but I was thinking about when I was hanging out with some of my friends in Chicago that are not deep comic book fans. And I was trying to explain to them what the con was, because they have an idea of what a Comic Con is. They know that people dress up.
Yeah.
And that's maybe about all they know. And explaining what a con is and why it's fun is very hard, I found out.
Yeah.
Because for me, I don't dress up.
Mm-hmm.
And there's probably 75 to 80% of the fandom there is not what I like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
This year's big theme was Has Been Hotel, for anyone curious. A thing that I think only my 13-year-old nephew is into, as well as every other 13-year-old in America.
And that is not a criticism. I have very specific tastes of what I like, but it's the idea of being in a space with passionate fans of something, whether it's superheroes, whether it's Has Been Hotel, no matter what. It's
a minion that was also what?
A Judge Dredd.
A Judge Dredd.
We saw a Judge Dredd minion.
Yeah.
So the intersection of different fandoms is fascinating to me, but also the idea of being around a group of people that are passionate about things, unironically.
Yeah.
I really enjoy. And I feel like, again, this is the first con I've been to since 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a little bit hesitant for a number of reasons between, health, safety, just my own anxiety about being in crowds.
Sure.
But there were moments this weekend where I was just like, oh, this is why I love this. This is why I love comics.
Yes.
This is why I love doing this.
Yeah.
This is why I love having a podcast to talk about it.
Yeah.
So it really did reinvigorate a lot of things for me.
Yeah.
It was great. Yeah.
No, that's a perfect summation. It's such a surreal thing. I've been to some conventions since 2019.
Yeah.
But they were gaming conventions. It's a very different vibe, right? People are there with specific purposes of they want to buy things, they want to play things, and that's a different mentality. I know there's people that go to the conventions that are there to see specific performers live and see their games and talk to people who are creating games, and that's a different thing than comic book creators. I think you go to a gaming convention sometimes to play Magic or play Pokemon or play different board games and tabletop RPG games that you maybe wouldn't have access to otherwise. Whereas comic conventions are a thing where you're going to meet the quote unquote celebrities of comics in a lot of ways and maybe get access to things that you just simply don't have access to daily or on a regular basis when you go to your shop or when you go to your hobby shop or whatever you're doing. So again, that passion is there across the board, whether you're into Funko Pops, which clearly a lot of people are according to this convention. And I think anyone who's been to a convention over the last decade knows that Funko is a very big presence of a lot of these things.
Yeah.
Especially the bigger ones, the Reed Pop shows, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe if you go to your Mocha Fest, I've talked to a lot of people about and Brooklyn Comic Con, it's very focused on the comics creation process and the people who create those comics. But for a big media convention like C2E2, similarly New York City Comic Con and Emerald City, there's a presence for a lot of different nerd interests. Yeah. But I think it's true what you said. There is this overwhelming passion that is there for all these people. Like they all get to wear their weird Venom shirts and wear their like this style that I've seen all across the con of like this like 90s style like big title with like a really like JPEGified image of like or three or four people of the same thing. Like I saw one of like the Winchesters from Supernatural. It just says like Winchesters in this big Times New Roman font at the top. It's like a style right now.
Wow.
I think I think our friend Kara was wearing a shirt like that for like episode 4, like Star Wars, that she sent a photo to us. And I love that because like it's unironic. People are wearing that not to like be funny, you know, or saying, oh, I'm just wearing this Nirvana shirt. I don't even know who that band is, which is a Gen Z thing or whatever.
Right.
But they're wearing it because they love this thing and they finally get to be among people that like understand that. And I say finally as if like this is the first one ever, and it's not the case, but we do this and we come to these things because we know we're going to come across people that love this kind of stuff. And I think like what we saw this whole weekend for our specific niche of things has been that like every single comic book creator we talked to was like super duper cool to talk to about comics. Like every single person we talked to was just like jazzed to talk what they're doing and all the stuff that they're working on, because that's the side of stuff I think we gravitate more towards. Less about like the cosplay meetups and like the fandom meetups and stuff, because that was all over C2E2. I didn't participate in that. I don't think you participated in that, but it was still cool to be like, first thing we did when we got here is like we happened to walk or run into like Jesse Lonergan was there, and like I was like, hey, blah blah, like really love your stuff. I got this book Faster that you made and I really loved it. And he was like, whoa, like you like this book?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I was like, dude, are you fucking you're killing me with this. Like, it's crazy.
I didn't realize that Klaus Janson was going to be at the con.
Yeah.
I had no idea until you mentioned it, Mike.
We walked by that one, for some reason, somehow Friday and Saturday, Paul and I walked the entire con like 4 times. Yeah. And we somehow didn't go down this one row that had like every single big name you could ever think of in comics. Right? Genuinely. Like, it was like Klaus Janson, Rod Reese, like, and people David that I was Finch, like, I didn't even know they were, David Finch was, and I was like, I didn't even know these guys were here. Like, and I combed over the C2E2 list. But yeah, we came across that today, fortunately. Yeah, and I think this is what happened.
And then I had like, you know, the thing was like, okay, I like Klaus Janson. I'm not going to probably buy original artwork because it's going to be very expensive. Commission's going to be ridiculous. But like that, he has drawn and inked some of the most important comics of my life. I mean, Dark Knight Returns. I mean, I mean, all the Frank Miller Daredevil stuff. Just an iconic inker. And an inker that, when he inks somebody, their pencils look like Klaus Janson inks. Like you know, it's not that thing where it's like he's tracing everything. It's like, you know, when he inks something. Yeah. But one of my favorite Batman comics of all time is the series that he illustrated and inked, and it was written by Grant Morrison, the Batman Gothic storyline, which, self-plug, Mike and I talk about on the first episode of season 1 of A Better Batmobile at patreon.com/IRCB podcast. But like that story is so important to me. So like when I found out he was here, I'm like, okay, I didn't know he was here, so I didn't bring those issues. I have all those issues at home. And then there are so many people, like there's so many like retailers selling comics. Mike and I spent maybe like 30 minutes like combing through a bunch of long boxes.
Dude, not even 30 minutes. I think we went through, it was like 20 minutes, and then immediately you're like, oh, it's here.
This is the issue 1 of that art story arc. I found it. Boom, boom, boom. So like
on top of the 2 others that we found, it was like, oh, they have 2, 3, 4, and 5, but not number 1.
Not number 1. I was able to find it. It was very affordable. It was like $4 for the issue, and then I go to his booth, you know, and the thing was like, with a legendary creator like that, if you're not getting commission work, it feels like kind of putting them out, because that's how they make their money at this point. But I went to his booth, and it was like $15 for a signature, which again, seems like a lot, but again, he's a legend. That's how they make their money. They're not doing regular work at this point. But I had a moment, because I've done that before, where I've gotten a signature to somebody, and it's a very brief interaction. But there's a moment where I could tell him, this is one of my favorite Batman comics of all time. And he doesn't know me. Mike, you know me.
Yeah, I know.
That's a big deal. If I say this is my favorite Batman comics, that's a big endorsement. And then to have him say, it's like, oh yeah, it's a really good story. It's really dark, isn't it? And then we talked for like maybe like 2 or 3 minutes about the comic itself, and I got to ask him about, so what was Morrison's script like when he got it from Grant Morrison? And like Janson told me like what the script was like. And he pointed out some of his favorite moments in the story. And I got to ask him, was like, how did you figure that out? And Klaus Janson's like, oh, Morrison they would put the thumbnail of that scene in the script, so I knew how to illustrate it.
Mm-hmm.
And then at a certain point, Klaus Janson asked me, do you know about Morrison's theory that every Batman story is canon? It's like, yes, of course I do. So it's like that moment, it's like, oh, this person that illustrated the story really loves Batman and loves storytelling and loves how comics work.
Mm-hmm.
And to have even just like a 3 or 4 minute conversation with them reminded me of that, where it's like, oh, we're all here because we love the same thing.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
and like those are the moments at cons that I really value.
Yeah.
Same thing with talking to Dave Baker. Again, Dave Baker's been on the show a bunch. Just to be able to see him face to face, talk to him, and be passionate about stuff. And there were many times during this con, Mike, where we would talk to somebody new and mention, like, oh, yeah, we know Dave Baker. Like, oh, cool, I know him too. And that was our like,
I know his work.
Cool,
or I'm like really
cred. You know?
Yeah, the fact that we had like had Dave Baker on the show multiple times. We talked to him about Mary Tyler Moore. We talked to him about his other stuff they've done, like Forest Hills Bootleg Society and the other work that he's done with the Kogo. It's like it's so funny to hear other people be like, oh yeah, no, that's the shit. That's the good stuff right now in comics. And we're like, yeah, like that's what we specialize in. Which, like, not to toot our own horn, but like I think you and I have reflected on multiple times this weekend has been like, it feels good to be acknowledged by other like creators and folks in the industry, not just creators themselves, but other folks who are working in and around the industry that we talk to, that like, yeah, we're paying attention to like the right stuff, or what it feels like is the right stuff. And like I don't know, like it's really affirming to me, because I feel like we sit in like we sit in a void a lot. We put out this podcast and we get some incredible feedback from the folks on our Discord and stuff, but like the greater world beyond our like very wonderful community is pretty unknown, you know, because we are like a small community. But then to like go out and interact with the rest of the comic community and hear like the connections that other people are making about things and the works that they're reading, the things they're interested in are like aligned with the stuff that we're interested in is super duper cool. And it's like, oh yeah, we really are part of that industry. Like we are a separate like section of it, but like we're also a part of this bigger bubble. It's killer to me. It's so cool.
And it kind of is really reaffirming. So like, I only went to like a couple panels this weekend, which is fine. Like that's not the reason I'm here, but like the first panel we went to was about the future of comic book retail. So you're talking about like, which, you know, we're very like, you know, realistic, pragmatic comic book people, so we know the industry is like maybe not in a great shape. And I feel like we went into that panel like waiting for it to be pessimistic. There were moments in that panel talking to people that own comic book stores, and they were weirdly optimistic because they understood like the future of comics is not what it is now. It's going to be more queer, it's going to be more acceptable, it's going to be more diverse, and it's going to reflect the tastes of the community that the retail stores are in. And I think that connection made a lot of sense to me, where it's just like, all these people, you cannot own a comic book store if you don't fucking love comics. It would not work. You know what I mean? And the people on that panel, as pessimistic as they were at times, all loved the idea that comics are always going to exist. We just have to find out how to make sure the wider audience of buyers are as passionate about comics as we are. Like, how do you do that? And I feel like, even though we're not retailers, we're just a comic book podcast, I feel like we are kind of, what we're trying to do with the show is the same thing. It's like we want to spread that passion, even though it's got different tastes. We can say like, there's the things we like, and the reason we like them might connect with you. You know what I mean? And so I feel like that panel, like as pessimistic as I thought it would be, was weirdly like,
They kicked it off with like a really negative sentiment, and I think like a little bit of context there is like, so the podcast panel the panel that we went to was put on by the guys who run Challengers Comics and Conversations in Chicago, Dal Bush and I'm blanking on the guy's name. But yeah, the two guys that run that, and they, if you ever listen to their podcast, it skews very, 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 very negative, because there are so many frustrations in the comics industry, and I think what made that panel really interesting to me is I walked in with a lot of that knowledge going, okay, I kind of think I know what these guys are going to say because I've heard a lot of it on their show. And the fact that they like flipped the script of their normal back and forth, because it was like one of the guys, Dal, is like usually very negative on the podcast, and the other guy is very positive. And they flipped the script, and Dal was surprisingly very, very positive about things. But I think he was positive because, one, he was talking with other comic book shop owners who have very different opinions than I think the two guys who work their shop in Chicago. But I think they all came to the conclusion after their discussion of like, there is no one size fits all to running a comic book shop because there is no one size fits all for the community that you're going to be in, right? Like the community of the shop that for the guy that was running one in Brooklyn and Queens is not the same as the one that's running in Portland. Exactly. It's not the same as the one that's running in Chicago. It's not the same as the one that's going to be in the middle of nowhere, Kansas. It's not the same as the one that's in Grand Rapids. It's not the same as one that's California or Miami or wherever. And I think like that was a really eye-opening experience. It seems very obvious after they say it, but it was like, I feel like there has been this mentality of like, if you open a comic book shop, you got to do this and this and this and this and this because your readers are going to want that. And it's like, well, that kind of really depends on the community that you open up to, right? Like they talked about how like you're never not going to have Batman and Spider-Man in your shop, and that makes sense. But everything else outside of Batman and Spider-Man can be whatever you as the initial curator of your shop wants it to be, and then you take feedback from your community and you cater to that community. And I think like all of the people that were on that panel had been running shops for at least like 10 years or something like that, something around there. So it was interesting to see that, because I think like 10 years ago having that panel would have been like, if you're going to open up a shop, there would have probably been more of a checklist. And I think nowadays these shops, I think especially after the shutdowns of the pandemic and having to adjust to try to make sure that their shops survived the fact that no one was coming in to buy things, have made them realize that it's like, oh no, like my shop can operate very differently from yours and we can both succeed in the same industry, because like there is no blanket. You may live in a community that skews way more towards manga than you know, daily or monthly comics. And that's fine, because you can survive on that as long as you cater to that audience.
Right.
I find that very inspiring.
It's very inspiring. For me, the next hurdle is, how do you get people to know that there's comics for them? You know what I mean? And that's a big thing. It's like, for most people that don't read comic books regularly, for them comics are just superheroes. Like, how do you tell people like there's something for you, you just have to find it? You know, so like, and I think a con like this, as much as insular as it is, because it is very like specific interest and niche focused, again, it kind of reminds me, is like, there kind of is comics for everybody. You know what I mean? Like, the fact that we could talk to, again, Klaus Janson has been doing it forever. We could, you know, I got an autograph from Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, who was doing comics in like the late 60s and 70s. He's been doing it forever, you know. And then we could talk to people like Greg and Fake, who do Santos Sisters, which is so radically different from anything else that's coming out. It's just like, or Dave Baker, it's like somebody's like doing cutting edge stuff. It's like, how do you get those comics into people's hands, or to let them know like there's so much broader space? I feel like a con, again, like I said, feels like a very specific audience, but it reminds you like there is something for everybody. Again, there's a lot of comics at the con that were not for me, but they're there for somebody. So,
but I think it's also important to like think about a convention like this as a way for people to also try to experience new things without in a safe way, right? You're like, I'm going because I'm really into Attack on Titan. I love Attack on Titan. I know there's going to be an Attack on Titan fandom thing here. As I'm walking through Artist Alley, because it's part of the con. Like, I'm not just gonna focus on like the 5 manga shops that are here. I'm gonna look around. Maybe something catches your eye. Maybe you want to give something a chance. You know, I think people. I like to hope. My optimistic look at the world is that people go to these things with like money to spend and saying, I'm gonna try something new. And the only reason I think that is because I definitely we talked to Dave for like 10-15 minutes today, which was really, really cool. But like, people came up and looked at his book and said, I don't know what this is. Can I buy it? And somebody went, and they sold it. Like that, and that is awesome to me. That is, I don't know who those people were, but like, they were not people that looked like me and Paul. I'll tell you that, right? And that's really, really cool to see folks walk up to these random folks that are selling books at this convention and saying, can I try this? Like, this looks interesting to me. How much is it? You know, that like gives me hope that people are willing to get outside of their like bubble of things that they can do. Because quite honestly, if you're in a big fandom, you know, like Attack on Titan is the one I'm just going to hammer on. Has-Been Hotel being the other big one, right? You could have just gone to all the Has-Been Hotel merch folks and been set for this convention.
The whole weekend,
but you would have to walk past all these other people to get there. And that's like a really cool, like, I don't want to say like rite of passage, but it's like an experience. It's a thing that you do at a convention that hopefully like broadens your horizons for this kind of stuff. I think like when we think about from the position of like a comic book shop, you know, it's important to have diverse books and an array of things for people to look at. You have to balance that with the, oh no, I'm going to buy all these books and no one's going to buy them part of it. But like, it is important to have those types of books because you never know what's going to catch someone's eye, what's going to seem interesting.
Right.
And especially you as the person who's selling those books, as the curator and owner of that shop, you sometimes need to be like, hey, have you heard of this thing? Because I see all the books that you read. You might like this thing that's off the beaten path, you know?
Exactly.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's so interesting to me about coming to a con like this is like the reminder that there are more people into it than I thought, but it's still a small enough community where you can kind of just start a conversation with anybody about just liking comics.
Yeah.
And I mean, there were times when I was talking to creators about comics that they haven't read or they remember something that I haven't read, but like we're still passionate enough to make, we recognize like, okay, if you're talking about that, it must be important.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, I think the Artist Alley phenomenon is my favorite part of the con because like again, you can be experiencing so much different stuff.
Yeah.
And different creators, and there are moments when you're talking to somebody when you can have those connections, be like, oh, we kind of just like the same thing. We're coming from different angles. I've always felt, you know, as maybe it's just me having really bad imposter syndrome as an outsider to comic books. Because I've always just been a consumer. I've never wanted to write my own comic. I've never wanted to illustrate my own comic.
Right. We talked about that over dinner tonight.
Yeah,
right?
it's like I have no interest in being a creator. I'm a consumer and I like talking about it. And sometimes that's all you need.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That passion comes across when you talk to people who are making these things because they have that same passion, but they channel it differently.
Yeah.
Right? Like we channel our passion for comics by doing this.
Exactly.
Right? Sitting down and talking about it and analyzing it and understanding it and being on the other side of the paper of the book, right? Whereas these creators have that same kind of passion and they channel it by like doubling down in their book and reading weird shit to inspire them in order to do Mary Tyler Moore on.
Yeah. And like, how do
I love you, Dave. If you listen to this, I love you, Dave. I'm just
No, yeah, and I think that's recognized. I think that's very, very fascinating to me. Like that passion is recognized. There was a moment at the con when we were trying to find the issue for Klaus Janson to autograph for me, and we went to a table, and the guy who was like running the booth asked like, "Are you looking for anything in specifically?" And we said like, "I'm looking for this issue 6 of Legends of the Dark Knight. That's the first issue of this arc." And the guy goes, "Yeah, they're probably in a dollar bin. That's where that book belongs." And like, I took that really personally because like,
dude, I thought you were gonna like stop what you were doing to debate that guy. It was bonkers.
And then I'm like, well, it's a pretty important comic to me because of my favorite Batman stories. And just like, he's like, yeah, well, you think about it. He's like, Legends of the Dark Knight, that's a dollar bin comic because there's 100 whatever issues of it. And there's not a key issue. I'm like, what are you talking about? Because it's got like a lot of important stories in it.
Right.
But the guy eventually like explained it saying like, as a retailer, there's not one book that can get a lot of money. I'm like, oh, I don't give a fuck how much it costs.
Right.
I mean, like, but I like the story.
Right, because this is one of those places that has like a ton of CGC graded books, like old books, and they had a bunch of like very well preserved books in like these super solid like bag and boards and stuff. And that's what we were originally looking through before Paul he asked us what we were looking for. But like. Yeah, the way he came at it, it was like so aggressive, like unnecessarily aggressive. But then you got to talk to him, which was good.
Yeah,
right?
And he said like, "Oh, there's great stories, but as a retailer, there's no issues I can like sell for a lot of money." I'm like, we love the same thing,
right?
But from very different angles. Right. Because like I mean, again, the issue I was looking for, that Gothic storyline, is one of the most important Batman stories for me. The monetary value is secondary. Right. And I feel like, again, on the flip side, maybe the criticism of a con like this, at times it does reinforce the speculatory nature of comics, speculative nature, the multiple booths of CGC graded stuff, people waiting to get their books graded, the people that roll in with the short box full of comics to get signed, to flip. That is a side of fandom that I know exists and I know kind of monetarily props up part of the industry, but I kind of hate. Yeah. Because it doesn't feel genuine.
But this brings me to like, I do want to talk about like the other side of the con, right? And it's that, right? Like we walked around a bunch. Like we saw a lot of different stuff. It's weird One of the things I found interesting about this con is there was no publisher presence at all.
Very,
right?
yeah.
Like this I feel like is maybe the rarity.
It's all small press.
It's all small press. Like
Yeah.
we talked to the folks over at Silver Sprocket for a minute, which was fucking
Amazing.
awesome.
Yeah.
Like it was so funny. We walked up there and I'm just like, hey Paul, I read this. This is really good. Oh yeah, I also grabbed this book. There's that book over there that I've been recommending to everybody. Like,
and the people running the booth were like, you should read this, you should read this, you should read this.
Dude, they were so engaged. It was awesome. But like there was no big publisher press, right? Like there's no Dark Horse, no Image, no Marvel, no Boom. I think had a booth next to the Scott's Collectibles where Tiny Onion was, but I don't think it was a big presence. No Oni Press. Nobody that I would, even the smaller pubs, I would have expected at least a little presence. There was none here. But I think C2E2 is not that con for them because they Marvel, DC, when they have presence, it's usually, I think, at SDCC or New York City. And I think that's kind of it for them. Other things, like I remember Oni, I think, is usually at New York City. Boom as well. Not even Xenoscope was here. I mean, Xenoscope's usually at every con. But yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. But then the other side of it was there was a lot of folks selling just like marked up books.
Yeah.
Like a lot of marked up books. Like I posted in the Discord. If you're in the Discord, you probably saw it. I was laughing at the fact that there was like a $100 copy of Ultimate Spider-Man #1 first printing that was just like in a long box of all these other Ultimate comics. So I was like, can I find a copy of Ultimate Spider-Man #1? It's like not under $75.
That's crazy. That's wild.
And like I walked by this one booth a couple times this weekend, and they were doing like live whatnot bids for books that I think they had flipped or that they were just holding on to for the con. Live TikTok shop stuff, like, and that's like a side of I think comics that we don't really engage with as a show.
No.
As even readers, I don't think anybody on the show really is into that too much, if at all. But it was interesting to see that the presence was there. Like there is still that like collector, flip it and sign it, get it CGC graded, make sure that it goes out for this price. Like that stuff is still there. And to me, that feels, I'm going to say this and it's going to be offensive to maybe some of our listeners. That's like more of a West Coast California thing. Maybe less so than an East Coast Midwest thing. And that's probably not entirely true. But I know that there are shops on the West Coast and in like California and Nevada, and that's like all that they do.
Yeah.
I feel like for like even the shop that I go to in New Jersey, like they have some like CGC books, but that's just like one of those like you got to have them in at the back of your shop just in case kind of thing. Yeah. But again, I haven't been to every single shop on the East Coast, so I can't completely speak to that. But it was interesting to see that was happening like on the show floor and how much of a presence it was. Though I feel like the amount of places that were doing that was less than I would have expected, given how big, in heavy quotes, that side of the market feels like
Yeah, exactly. Again, that stuff has always been distasteful to me because it reminds me of 90s comics.
Yeah.
The speculatory market. But to spin it back to a positive note, maybe to kind of like reflect on for the ending, like the fact that we waited in line to get a signature from James Tynan and Martin Simons. It's just like the fact that James Tynan IV had a line that long and not working on a big two book right now.
Yeah, the people were trying to get the House of Slaughter book signed.
Yep.
Something is Killing the Children and Department of Truth.
I
think I saw like 2 guys with Batman books.
Yeah.
Right? Everything else was his indie books, his creator-owned works.
And there was a longer line for Chip Zdarsky because he's writing Batman.
Dude, okay, no. We need to talk about the Chip Zdarsky line because holy fuck.
It never was short. Never.
I showed up, first thing, I was like, 10 a.m., I'm getting to the con. I think I arrived at like 10:05 because I was like, I don't want to sit and stand in this fucking thing. So I walk into the con immediately. And the first thing I did was like, well, I got to get these Martin Simons books signed. I got to get them signed because he's going to have a line all weekend. He's only doing a couple signings. Turns out I could have gotten him signed at any time because he was like at his booth the entire weekend.
Entire time.
It's fine. Yeah. But I remember I was like, all right, I'll get him stuff and then I'll go do Chip Zdarsky. It can't be that bad, right? Dude, all weekend from start of con till end of con, there was at least 100 people in his line.
Yeah.
Non-stop all weekend. And like, that's awesome. That is exciting because on the one hand, like, damn, I couldn't get my book signed.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, people fucking love Chip Zdarsky books so much.
And I don't want to be dismissive because I know it says because he writes Batman right now, but I'm sure a lot of people are getting like Sex Criminals,
Kaptara,
Yeah.
like all of his other books that I think are doing pretty well.
Really well.
Yeah.
Exactly.
God,
So-
if I thought of bringing my public domain trade, like that would have almost been worth the wait.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to be like, hey, can you sign your weird sex book and your other weird book that you've got going on? I'd love it.
exactly. But the fact that his line is so big, but I think James Tynan's line was also just as long.
Dude, when we got in line today, we got in early, and I got in like an hour before the signing started, and we still waited a half hour
at least
to get up there. And then there was a line that wrapped around. Sorry, I don't mean to harp on it, but it's like it was crazy how big his line was on a Sunday, which is like the least popular day. But anyways,
and like again, he would sign anything he wrote, but like the booth he is at is just like his most popular books, which are Something's Killing the Children and Department of Truth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And Nice House on the Lake. So that moment to me was like, okay, you can be successful and be popular and have passionate fan bases outside the big two. Like, that's a nice reminder of that. And I think like that might tie into what I think is the health right now of the comic book industry, is that there is something for every type of fan base.
Totally.
And fan taste. The matter is, how do you tell people that aren't tuned into comics, there's a horror comic for you, there's a crime comic for you, there's a Santos Sisters. I think we were talking to the Santos Sisters because they had an after party on Saturday at a local brewery, which is very fun. We met some cool people there, and they were just hanging out and talking comics to everybody, and they were talking about like they make these like little standees that are basically like what you'd see at the checkout counter that would have like candy bars or baseball cards in it, but it had their comics in it. Like, that's really smart marketing. And at one point I was talking with those guys, and they said like, oh, we want to get these into record stores. I'm like, yes, if you're at a record store, there's a lot of crossover between people that like records and comics. If they saw that type of Archie influenced comic, if they don't read comics anymore, and it's like, whatever, $4 or $5, I'll give this a shot.
Right.
Get it in front of a different audience's eyes. Like, that's really smart. So like, and I think it all ties back into when I started this conversation with you, Mike, where it's just like, what is the con for? Like, who is the con for?
Yeah.
It's kind of for everybody, but not everybody knows it's for them.
Yeah.
Is that a way to put it?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to put it. I think like when we talk to Greg and Fake, right, who do the Santos Sisters, like, they are coming at comics from such a different perspective than I think the vast majority of people are, in that like they understand what works if you're trying to get a Spider-Man book out, but they're self-publishing a book that's very different and like is out there, and they're trying to say like, well, we aren't gonna ever surpass Saga.
Yeah.
Like, that's not really their goal.
What they want.
But they want to get their book into the hands of people who like want to just read a comic book. And like, and I say that, it seems like a really vague statement, but there is like this idea of just like reading a comic book that is like an old way of thinking about like approaching these like disposable things. And they fully embrace that idea of like, sure, their book's collectible because it's like 500 printing, blah, 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 if you want to go that route. But from like a perspective of like, I just want to grab a thing off of a magazine rack, have a funny little book to read, and then maybe throw it away, recycle it, when you're done. And they totally embrace that by saying like, yeah, we print on glossy on the front, newspaper on the inside. The colors are really simple. We've got this very simple art style. Like, the jokes and bits in our books are very simple and funny. Like, and that's perfect. Like, it's like in trying to take this nostalgic look at comic books and say like, how can we do that? And like, Archie still does this, but you can tell different stories other than like Archie and Veronica and Betty, and that's what those guys seem to be doing.
Absolutely,
And it's fun that they're trying to get their book into the hands of people that aren't necessarily like your Wednesday warriors, right? They're trying to say like, anybody can read a book or a comic book, and like that idea of reading a comic book in this weird nostalgic term that feels really vague is like what they seem to be targeting. And that's really exciting that people are trying to come at comic books from a way that is non-traditional. Like, that people are still trying to innovate in this space that feels saturated and feels like it's got like a single through line, and the single through line is get lucky.
Get lucky.
But really it's like, you can, like, I think Kickstarter and webtoons and stuff, that was another thing that we heard talking about at that comic shop panel was, like, there are other avenues for people to break into comics, and I think that we as comic book fans kind of ignore some of them sometimes because they aren't just go to your shop, pick up your Wednesday comics, and go home. Instead, it's like, well, people are going out of their way to buy a collected edition of a webtoon that they read for free online. So like, the market's still there and the people are still interested in this medium, But I think like times are changing a little bit, you know, and we kind of have to adapt. And I think comic shops have to adapt. We as readers have to adapt and understand that like people are still passionate about this medium, but it's in different ways, and we should celebrate that rather than try to say like that's not right, you know. And I really am just excited that like this weekend proved a thing that I think we've been hypothesizing on a lot on the show over the last couple of years. And I think maybe other people have come to this realization much sooner than us because they've been out and they've been talking to people, or they're more engaged with their local comic book shops. But like for the IRCB crowd who's listening now, like I'm letting you know that like comics are still alive and well, and we should still be very excited about them. Things may be changing a little bit, but that's for the better. Like it's only going to perpetuate comics. It's not going to remove them in any way.
Yeah.
So yeah, here's hoping that DC rolls out like a webtoon style thing, and we never have to pay for a DC comic ever again, right?
Yeah, I mean, think about. I mean, the future of comics is something that going into this con, I may have been a little bit more pessimistic about, but like that panel and just being around people that love comics, like it's a nice reminder of that. Like there's a future for that, and I don't know. I mean, I had a great time. I think coming to this con, I wasn't sure what to expect. I think I had already like built in a lot of time to like not be at the con into my schedule.
Yeah, sure.
Which is like what you need. And like I feel like crowds are overwhelming at times, but the interactions I had with people, being able to say thank you to Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, to have a little brief Batman conversation with Klaus Janson, to talk to Dave Baker. Yeah. You know, it's like all those things like added up to like a really satisfying weekend to make me be like, yeah, I fucking love comic books. You know what I mean? Like, it's a nice reminder. Because I get burned out. I fall behind on reading my monthly, and like I feel like it feels like a burden. And I bought some amazing comics. I bought a bunch of comics from Silver Sprocket this weekend that I'm excited to read. Yeah. And like to just be kind of reinvigorated, like, yeah, I fucking love this shit. And as someone that likes to think they're on the cutting edge of comics and realizing, oh, there's way more shit out there than I know about.
Dude, every convention does that to me. Yeah. I love it. Like, it's almost like the best, worst feeling in the world to be like, oh, I didn't know everything. Fuck.
It turns out
that's exciting. That's exciting.
I thought I was tapped in, but I guess I'm not. And on the flip side, to be reminded, like, I like comics because I read Batman when I was like fucking 7 years old. Yeah. And like to have these interactions with these people that shaped my taste in superhero comics or shaped my love of comics. You know, it's great. I had a great time.
Yeah, man.
And again, it helps getting a press pass. but at the same time, like I am coming out of this as a nice reminder of like why I do this podcast. Yeah. You know, and why I like talking to everyone, whether it's you on the other people on the show or just people in the Discord or just like people I ran into on the floor.
Hell yeah.
You know, it was a nice way to be reminded of like how great fandom can be.
Yeah, man.
And I know we've been talking for a while, and this is a conversation another time. When you're only engaging with fandom or comics or any medium via the internet, fandom feels very toxic.
Dude, ugh.
To be reminded to like have a moment to talk with people that just like stuff, the same thing you do, and there's no judgment, and to have multiple panels we went to where creators are basically saying, or shop owners are saying, like, the future of comics is diverse, it is queer, it is more accepting than it is now. It's a nice reminder that the toxicity of comics is a fraction of the fandom.
It's a loud, minuscule piece of a greater group.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. If you love comics, you shouldn't want to keep other people away from comics. Right. That doesn't make any sense to me.
And the funny thing about it is that, like, I think there's like this broken thought process that like, oh, comics are so hard to get into. You can't give comics to anybody, right? And I think we talk about that a lot. Like as a show, we talk about that as fans. We talk about that people talk about it online, and it's like, I don't think that that's true.
That's not true.
I don't think that that's true at all. No. I think it's a matter of we come to offering comics to people with like a lot of preconceived notions about how hard it was maybe for us. Yeah. Right? Or like what we maybe thought was hard, or like we perceive as hard when it's not actually hard.
It's not that hard.
Right? Like we talked to someone tonight over dinner who was like, yeah, you threw me this book and I kind of just like read it. Is that okay? And we were like, yeah. Did you like it? You know? And
Yeah.
he seemed to be like, he's like, yeah, I thought it was very interesting. Like, whatever. You know, we were talking about Hoxpox. So we kind of somebody had thrown Hoxpox blindly, and it was very interesting because I think like we as comic book readers go, oh God, there's so much baggage. How can I offer someone a book?
Right.
And it's like, no, we were all there. We've all been that person who blindly dove into a book and said, I don't know if I get this, but I kind of like what I'm reading.
Yeah.
And then we kept going. And I think that like, Big Two aside, like there's still plenty of other books that you can hand to people and you're like, there's no baggage on this book. And there's way more than you think. And even if you think something's out there and weird, like you got to give people like the benefit of the doubt to say like they're probably as willing as you are, or if not more, to try to give something a chance because it's new and unique and different and interesting.
Yeah.
And clearly there's a fuckload of books out there that are doing that right now, and they are not Big Two books.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, and that was like the most exciting thing for me. On top of getting some really awesome Gambit sketches this weekend. Very pleased about that.
Yeah. I got a pretty good Judge Dredd sketch.
You got a pretty good Judge Dredd sketch. Yeah. If you haven't checked them out there on our Discord, we'll post all these photos and stuff. But or maybe I'll compile this into a video with some of the B-roll that I made and put this on Patreon. But yeah, man, it was a killer weekend.
Yeah.
I'm so tired. I haven't been this tired in a very long time, but I got a lot of steps in, so I feel good about that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, and to sum it all up, I think going into this weekend, the idea of having a busy weekend combined with some personal stuff I'm going through felt overwhelming.
Sure.
But I'm coming out of it invigorated in a way because it reminded me like, this is why I do this podcast, and I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of being a comic book fan. I'm proud, it's the thing of just like, oh yeah, this is why I like this shit.
Hell yeah.
A lot.
Yeah, man.
And it's great. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Plus, we got to hang out all weekend. That was pretty
We
cool.
kind of exactly. I don't see Mike. I see Mike like maybe once a year.
Yeah, maybe.
And we got to spend like 3 days together.
Right.
It's fucking awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. So next year, come to fucking C2E2, guys. If you're listening to this, let's talk. Let's make plans. Let's do this.
Yeah.
We'll do a big IRCB meetup or something. It'd be fun.
Awesome.
But this is fun, Paul.
Mike,
Maybe if you have, maybe we'll have more to say, but maybe we'll bring it up on the next episode of the show as we sleep off a couple of these beers that we've had and
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and whatever. But I guess I don't know. I don't have anything else to say. We'll see how this ends up getting edited and put out. But I promise you, it will be edited. I'll say that. I will say that. So until next time, just remember, this is the most important thing I could say to you. Comics are good, and so are you.